So today we meet to conduct oversight of the administration's fiscal year 2016 $1 billion budget request for Central America, which would roughly triple the amount of funding for the region. According to the administration, this funding would support the U.S. strategy for engagement in Central America to promote prosperity, security, and good governance. It would also assist the Central American governments in implementing their Alliance for Prosperity plan. These efforts aim to address the massive influx of migrants we saw at our southwest border last summer, in which over 68,000 unaccompanied children sought admittance to the United States, 75% who were from the Central American countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, also known as the Northern Triangle area. As a result of this migration crisis, the U.S. engaged in media campaigns to discourage migration, conducted law enforcement operations to dismantle human smuggling networks, and created a new in-country refugee parole processing pilot program to provide a safer way for children and their parents to migrate to the United States. Under this program, parents living in the United States do not need to be U.S. citizens or in lawful immigration status to qualify for their child and spouse living in Central America to gain admittance to the United States. Instead, lawful immigrants who have benefited from the President's executive overreach on immigration are now also allowed to reunify their families through this program. This is appalling to me, and while I agree that we need to do all in our power to prevent another migration crisis, I'm baffled as to how this program would achieve its goals, since it's a welcome mat for a broader border surge and does nothing to deter Central American migration to the United States, since it only furthers the narrative of family reunification, it's late in the afternoon, I guess, that many Central Americans seek. Nevertheless, I do want to commend the leadership that governments in the region have shown to address the migration crisis. Earlier this month, I led a congressional delegation to the 7th Summit of the Americas in Panama, and our delegation met with the presidents of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras to discuss their Alliance for Prosperity plan and how it will address the root causes of migration. It was a fruitful discussion, and I told them that their plan is a good first step in the right direction. However, I also emphasized that money alone would not be sufficient to solving these problems. Similarly, I want to commend the actions of Mexico on increasing its immigration enforcement efforts, which are critical to U.S. border security. Last year, Mexico's Ministry of Interior reported that it removed over 104,000 Central American migrants, and Mexican agents conducted more than 150 raids on northbound trains that previously transported 500 to 700 migrants through Mexico to the U.S. border 3 times a week. This is a significant change from Mexico's past practice, but I also acknowledge that much more work needs to be done. Some believe that these efforts have been successful to the point that we will not see high levels of migration this year that we saw last year. I don't share that optimism, given the increasing numbers of Central American migrants we're seeing at Mexico's southern border on their way to the United States. According to Mexico's National Institute of Migration, Mexico is catching the highest number of Central American migrants so far to date, with numbers nearly double what they were last year compared to the same time frame. During the first half of 2015, Mexico has apprehended almost 60,000 migrants. This month alone, Mexico apprehended almost 14,000 migrants as opposed to 8,000 in April of last year. Furthermore, according to polling by the State Department, it appears that the desire to send children to the United States has actually increased in all 3 Northern Triangle countries since the peak of the crisis last year. Thus, the potential for another migration crisis this year at the U.S. southern border is real, and we must have a secure U.S. border and strong relationships with the regional governments. Today, we have 5 witnesses from the administration here to testify to their proposed whole government approach to $1 billion request and U.S. strategy for the region. According to the latest available statistics, the U.S. has provided roughly $24 billion in 2012 dollars to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras since 1946. Yet the administration's U.S. strategy for Central America clearly states that current U.S. and regional efforts to address the challenges in the region have been insufficient. So I ask, how will $1 billion more achieve different results from what we've seen so far? Will this be like Plan Colombia, which I fully support, which was originally a 6-year strategy but ended up requiring a stronger commitment and eventually almost $10 billion from fiscal year 2000 to 2014? And if so, is the administration strategy planning for that? In addition, the U.S. strategy also recognizes that success of the strategy depends on Central American governments themselves. We have seen some progress on this front with several public commitments and El Salvador's adoption of an investment stability law, Guatemala's extension of the mandate of International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, or CICIG, and Honduras's cooperation agreement with Transparency International to combat corruption. However, I believe that we must see more significant political will in these countries and greater involvement of local civil society, private sector, and religious organizations in the implementation and monitoring of their Alliance for Prosperity plan if they are to achieve accountability and lasting, sustainable results. For instance, all three governments could also take steps to require the completion of corruption tests across the entire police force, share with the U.S. their concrete plans for addressing judicial reforms, including completion of homicide investigations and successful prosecution of criminal offenders. Each sign an agreement with the Transparency International to combat corruption. Each agree to work with an independent organization similar to CICIG in Guatemala to address the impunity, and each show a clear prioritization of using their own funds to address the communities experiencing the highest rate of outmigration to the United States. So in conclusion, one issue I believe should be raised more often by the administration to countries that receive U.S. foreign assistance is their voting record with the United States and multilateral organizations such as the United Nations and the OAS. Specific to today's hearing, I'm concerned that El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras do not vote with the United States at least 50% of the time in the United Nations. If these countries are going to receive more in U.S. taxpayer dollars, shouldn't we ask that they support the United States position more frequently in multilateral organizations? So with that, I look forward to hearing from the witnesses, and I'll now turn to Ranking Member Albizu Reyes for his opening statement.